Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the NewBeeDrone AcroBee75 BLV5 bind and fly. This is a 2S whoop, and as you might expect, the flight controller is the BLV5. A flight controller has the STM32G474 MCU and an MPU 6000. They also note that the VTX on there has various power levels of 25 milliwatt for racing and 100 milliwatt for more open freestyle sort of situations. But it also has Smart Max, which they say is 400 milliwatts. I don't have a way of testing that, so gonna have to trust them on that one. The motors are 0804 14,000 kV motors, and they do have dual ball bearings. The receiver on this is the Express LRS. There may be other options available, but this is one I have right in front of me right now that has the TCXO crystal oscillator. Express LRS receiver. Camera is the Runcam Nano 4. Canopy is their NewBeeDrone Goober canopy. XT30 for a battery connection. Battery holder is this 3D print. And the props are the NewBeeDrone AZ 40mm tri-bladed props, which does come with an extra set. Here's one I damaged pretty badly. You also get 2 extra screws and a zip tie. A little tiny quick start guide. Also talks about the prop direction. And you get a little pack like this that has stickers and other NewBeeDrone special stuff, but it's not specific to the quad. Without a battery, it weighs 36.63 grams. With the Tattoo 550, it weighs just a touch over 68 grams. With the Tattoo 850, it weighs 76.37 grams. With the G&B 550 red label, about 65.25 grams. And the G&B green label, pretty much the same. It does have this carbon fiber support, which you saw earlier, that does support our motors. You wouldn't be able to use this frame without the carbon fiber support because it's got no middle section, as you can probably see. So the frame without the carbon fiber, would be super floppy. Best as I can get kind of a grab on that carbon fiber, it looks to be about 1 millimeter thick. And they do have these foam pads to kind of keep from scratching stuff up from your motor screws. And motor post to motor post, I'm getting 75 millimeters. We are going to start with the inside flight, and you probably will notice, especially when we switch over to the outside flight, that I have lowered my camera angle. I was Captain Crash a lot in my first week of flying this thing inside, and I decided, okay, I got to make a change. I'm just beating the sin out of this thing. Which I guess is good because we know that it's going to hold together. It does take damage pretty well as far as the frame goes. I'm not talking about the carbon fiber. The carbon fiber was perfect through all my crashes. I'm talking about the plastic part. And it does seem like it's a different kind of material with how it bends, and it kind of retains some of the bend, so then you just kind of reshape it with your fingers or any sorts of tools to put it back into shape. And I'll give you a better idea what I mean by that as we go into, I had what I thought was a pretty serious crash outside, which turned that prop up that I showed you in the quick specs, and then it kind of deformed the whoop and the kind of the front end of the frame. And as you've seen it, I just kind of bent it back to shape, and it's held its shape. And that was a pretty severe crash, so that's good for its durability. But the reason why, or I already explained the reason why I lowered my camera angle, was all my crashing. So this is more of a cruisy sort of flight through the house. Our 1S quads are probably better suited for flying through a house, but 2S, it is doable. It's just because you've got so much more power and thrust and weight that it becomes a little bit harder. I haven't been flying 2S whoops in the house much as of late. I was an advocate at it for a time. I think it was a few years ago now. Our 2S whoops were kind of my favorite, but our 1S whoops have just gotten so much better over the last few years to where I'm not certain if you're looking at a 2S whoop that you should be targeting flying inside your home. You know, our home is pretty spacious, and it's still fairly challenging to fly this thing around, and that's why I had to lower the camera angle. If you're starting out, I definitely don't fly this inside your house. Get all sorts of flight time outside, get real comfortable flying around outside before you ever think about taking it inside, because when you fly inside, throttle management is a challenge, especially on 2S, and just your margin for error, because you have all these different things in a traditional home, your doorways and all the furniture and whatnot, that if you get out of shape, it gets really hard to get back into shape without hitting something and potentially damaging. Now, if you're going to fly in a warehouse or some industrial indoor space, that's a completely different use case, in my opinion. I just don't want anybody to get it wrong that thinking about flying something like this, a 2S whoop, in their home and starting out in FPV is going to be all that viable. One thing that I didn't try that some people might be asking me about is trying out some Hobby King batteries that I touted a few years back. They're super small, they're super light, they're 2S, and they actually sometimes will give you 3 and 4 minute fly times, depending upon the quality of the battery. That's one of the kind of the wild cards. Now, don't go running out and buying those Hobby King batteries that I'm talking about. They are a very specific C rating. Not that that's any unit of measurement, but that's how you can identify them. Hobby King has changed the batteries so much that I haven't bought from them recently, so I don't know what they're doing with batteries. And they have several batteries that look nearly identical outside of that C rating on their label. Sometimes they'll have thicker wires. Actually, the last time I bought those batteries, they're little 300 milliamp batteries that are 2S. I bought them off of eBay. Something else about this flight that you will notice I do need to highlight is NewBeeDrone uses a specialized or specific OSD chip that from time to time the OSD does go away. Now, we have seen on previous versions where it just wouldn't come back until you got to the end of the flight. Thankfully, that's no longer the case. It goes away for a short period, as you see there. I've still got stat across the screen from the post-flight statistics, but I went back to the home screen or default view, and it's showing that. And you know, that's one of the oddities that I noticed was, yeah, now I've rearmed. We've gone back to the post stats, armed again, and it went back to normal. Kind of a little bit of an oddity. I know NewBeeDrone has been working on that, and that's beta flight specific. Here is our outside flight, and this will be on the 550 Tattoo battery. Inside, I was flying the BLV5, so that gives you some idea of the weight. You know, I went with a lighter battery because it was more maintainable as far as not being Captain Crash a lot so much on the inside. But this is where I think this is best suited. You want a whoop, and you want a whoop that you can fly outside, and you can do bigger moves, maybe quicker moves or more powerful moves, or just fly faster. You know, when you add cell count to our quads, in general, that is going to produce more thrust. And so these are going to be more viable outside than inside. I did have one, as I mentioned previously, very serious crash, and I will show that to you post this flight, and then we'll also look at the picture I took right after that happened. And as I've already discussed, I just kind of bent the frame back into shape. So that's really the only damage that I can report here. Do several different punch outs, dives, various maneuvers so you can see that how it flies. I didn't see anything glaring with the PID tune that would make me think it needed some dramatic improvement. It seemed to track as I expected. Didn't seem to have any bounce backs or excessive prop wash. Of course, when it comes to flying micros, there's some technique into minimizing the amount of prop wash. If you come down flat, kind of like I did right there, it does tend to have some prop wash. I see that more as pilot error because we need to nose up and increase our throttle as we're nosing up kind of smoothly, because you'll see that when you come in flat, or when I say come in, I mean come down. When you come down and your quad is just flat, not just camera view is flat, but the quad is flat, it will shudder like that. It's just part of, it's very, very, very rare that we have anything with a 2-inch prop or smaller that can handle that sort of stuff. And it's usually got to be super light and have a pretty good power to weight ratio and a really good tune. So I'm not going to draw that out as something that I think is bad, but it is there in most micros, and when it's not, it's pretty exceptional, really. But you know, I do all the things I tend to do. We do the flips and rolls. We do the slalom between the trees, the fence pass. We do the split S or Emmelman around the tree that kind of hangs over the fence there. We do chimney dives. We did kind of all the things that I typically do. To report some flight time, oh, there says some wind. I should report on this too. 10 to 12 miles an hour. It was oddly a hot day, 94 degrees, which in October, that's hot in these parts. So something else to keep in mind there. It was a hotty, sweaty day. Flight times, just doing kind of, I wouldn't say slow, flat, cruisy flight. I would just call it more exploratory. Not quite this speed, of course, and I didn't do any punch outs. That's the flight times I'm going to report, so this would be more like if you were training or getting used to flying or starting out in FPV. If you use the Tattoo 850 milliamp battery, you'll get between 810 to 820. For the most part. If you use the 550 Tattoo, you're going to get around 6 minutes. If you use the BLV550s, I got about 5.5 minutes doing that same sort of flight. Again, no punch outs, no fancy sort of freestyle maneuvers, just flat flying to where you're just wanting to get you're doing your training to get control of the quad and get comfortable with the stick movements and how the quad responds to those sorts of things. So I think of those as kind of beginner stages, and I think it's also someone who's getting started in FPV that flight time becomes kind of an element that is important to them, because they don't want to buy a bunch of batteries, which all the veterans would then say, just buy more batteries, and eventually they will get more batteries, just, you know, as we did when we started out. We may not have had a whole bag full of batteries for our quads, but eventually over time we certainly got a lot more as we enjoyed flying, and our demands for fly time went up. So one of the ways to get more flight time is to get more batteries. You've probably noticed in this outside flight that I also, the OSD also went away and came back. So the flight is ended. Again, that's on the Tattoo 550. 4 minutes and 13 seconds on that flight. Again, the flight times I was reporting were more flat sorts of flying. This is a snippet that I put together of the big crash that I had that I wanted to show you. I thought it was a pretty standout thing that happened, so I'm just doing my slalom between the trees, the 3 trees over there. Unfortunately, we may have to have one of them cut down, but then I do this punch over the house, and it kind of noses over on me, and you can kind of hear the prop wind up. Now, I did this several other times, and I think I did it in the primary video that I already showed you, and I didn't have any issue. So this was a little bit of an oddity. Of course, I land in the front yard, so you get a little bit of a VTX test, but I've got such a bent-up machine, I can't get out of there. And here is the picture that I took right after the crash. You can see that front right prop, it's all bent up, and then if you look at the whoop frame kind of in the center directly in front of the camera, you can see how bent up it is there. But of course, I just kind of bent it back using various hand tools and my fingers to get it back into shape, because I flew it much more after that. So I kind of highlighted this front area in that crash picture, and it was all sorts of, you know, wavy and stuff. And you can, as you see there, you know, I would just take my fingers and bend stuff back. I think I did, you know, pull out a little screwdriver to help me get into some of these spots to get things back to where it was. But I flew it a number of times more. If you're not familiar with the channel, I tend to fly these things, you know, somewhere between 30 and maybe as much as 60 or 80 flights. Specifically on the whoops, I tend to get more flights because of the inside flights. I can do those at any time of the day. But I tend to fly all the quads. At the very minimum, I think over the course of the last few years, it would be at least 12 flights, and that would be like the Cinewhoops. But commonly, it's 25, 35, probably somewhere between 25 and 40 total flights before I post my review. So I do tend to fly them quite a bit. A couple of things that I think would be important to highlight. One, if you want to swap out the camera, NewBeeDrone uses a really small connectors on their board. I don't know what this connector is for, but the camera connector is right up over here. But I wanted to show you, this is just smaller than our normal camera connectors. So you may have to splice in to the wiring a replacement camera. I didn't highlight it in the quick specs, but you can see it over there. They did put a capacitor over there. I didn't have any problems with that, you know, coming apart or anything like that. The Goober canopy held together just fine. The NewBeeDrone Z props, of course, they bend. So I would always rather have these bend than to break. And I believe the motor shafts are 1 millimeter still because they're 0804s. So it's much better for your prop to bend up than it is for the prop to be super stiff and then that impact and get transferred over to the shaft. And I always tend to try to get my props as far down as I can. You can see that prop's actually got a little nick in it as well, one I didn't change out because it was this one that was so seriously mangled. I highlighted it in the quick specs, but they have dual ball bearings. It's one of the things that NewBeeDrone tends to do. Their motors tend to be a little bit heavier than the bushing counterparts, but they'll run smoother, potentially more efficiently for longer than their bushing counterparts. So that should bode well for things. As far as this battery holder goes, it's fine. But I tell you, when it comes to getting in that big 850, that was a pain. I'm not even going to do it on camera because I have to like push this quad up against my stomach and then kind of get both fingers and stretch and pull to get the 850 in there. The Tattoo 550 was also a little bit of a struggle, but this one was even more of a struggle. Less of a struggle with the GNB batteries to get these in, but that's one advantage over having this print is it is flexible, so it allows you to more securely mount several different batteries as far as sizes go. You know, Cat2 batteries tend to be heavier than G&B. They also tend to perform a little bit better as well. But sometimes the weight kind of pushes you over as far as performance. Sometimes you can get this, depending upon the quad again, you can get the same sort of performance from a lighter weight battery because, well, you have to tow the battery weight around too. You can't just fly the extra performance of the battery without the extra weight. Motor connectors for easy motor replacement, which is nice and easy. You might be wondering about these screws here. That's how this print is held on. It's kind of hard to show you, but the print goes all the way under here, and the screws hold on to the 3D print. I didn't have any problems with the 3D print coming loose or anything. They also built into the frame kind of a T-style mount back here, and then they used, this came from the factory this way, they use a little zip tie right down here in this little notch, which they've made that notch in the frame for something to be in there, I presume, so that zip tie fits in nicely to keep your antenna secured down so you don't have to worry about it popping out and getting into your prop line. It's got two antennas on it. We've got this T-style antenna, and then you've got this bipolar, or this linear antenna for that specialized TXXO Express LRS. Typically with Express LRS and micros, when it comes to range, it's not an issue unless you're trying to do something extreme. If you're not doing something extreme, any old Express LRS works just fine. In this particular case, they kind of went the next step. And then this is our video VTX antenna, excuse me. And it's got the UFL. It's pretty tough to see. It's right down in there. One of the things that I suggest for some people, if you tend to crash especially in wooded areas or trees or brush, something that might get a hold of your antenna where it is the UFL, is to take a thin slice of your favorite glue. Hot glue doesn't work very well because the board gets hot because the VTX is on it and the glue just kind of melts away or falls off. Use some other sort of glue, not super glue though, some sort of removable glue that stays pliable. You can try E7000 or B6000, which have you. I, for years, recommended Welder, but they have pulled that off the market, and I don't know why. I recently got that question in the comment section. Somebody was looking for Welder and couldn't find it. I happen to have a couple of tubes, but I can't get it anymore. This should debut for around $160. It should be available as of the posting of this video. If you are interested in looking at the product page, or you're interested in taking a look to see if there's other products NewBeeDrone might be interested in, I will link the BLV5 here, the AcroBee75 BLV5, down in the video description. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know down there in the comments section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.